1 year ago, I set out to learn Japanese using anime and YouTube. This is how far I've come. So I'm making this video for 3 reasons. 1, to show how much Japanese I can learn in 1 year. 2, to show what methods I used. And 3, to log down what my current Japanese level is so I can compare it to next year. So I know what you're thinking. The first thing you want to know. How good is my Japanese really? Well, let's put it to a few tests. First of all, let's get JLPT out of the way. This is the Japanese Language Proficiency Test, where N5 is the lowest level and N1 is the highest. I cleared N3. Now, this is just a mock test, but it's done using real questions from real N3 past papers set up under real time constraints. I used a free app called Migi to do this test, and seeing as all these questions are from the real tests, I consider this a pretty legit clear. However, JLPT is not really worth measuring in my opinion, so let's take a look at the more important stuff. How good is my Japanese in real life usage? To find this out, we're going to test 4 things: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. First of all, reading. I put this up first because I hate reading. It's not just that I hate reading in Japanese, I hate reading in any language. I have this problem even in English, where if you give me a page full of words, I will just switch off and not read it. I don't have dyslexia, it's just 99% of the time, I don't need to read this in order to find this. This means that I don't have much experience reading in Japanese either because I just don't read that much. But that's okay though, because most of the media that I consume is not things to read. Either way, I just got the light novel of Bunny Girl Senpai Volume 8 as a hard copy to see if I can focus a bit better. I have the digital version of the entire series, but as stated earlier, I'm just not able to focus. When the audiobook version comes out on Audible, I think I'll be able to enjoy this a lot better. Anyway, let's put my reading to a test. So we're gonna read a thing or two that's actually practical to my day-to-day life. Okay, let's read out some random YouTube titles. 575オンラインみんなで作る絵な俳句イーブリーバー開店ハプニングバーオープン今宵は何が起こるかな大成功マグロ1匹さばいて手作りシーチキン作ってみた What the fuck is sea chicken? 犬山玉木と神楽メア付き合うならどっち究極の選択で即答する無字幕付きお互いキスマークをつけてデレデレする100倍 VTuber ペコラの配信を見てライスバーガーを買ってくるマミー Let's take a look at some comments too. 他のメンバーはそういう発言をしないように気をつけてるのに会長は自分の道を突き進むさすがや下ネタよりも完璧な漢字力に感動してしまった That Warfarin as his profile picture? Really? Nice CA さんの範囲の広さがわかりやすいですね知らないでこの単語を出てくるとか才能でしょう清楚だなこれが清楚だドラさんと並んで2人トップかな And finally, so here's volume 8 of Seishun Butaero. I'm gonna just flip to some random page and see what we get. Page 100. 備えも進めていかなければならなかった。あと1年あるとはいえ、ちょっとした空き時間有効活用していかなければ本番に間に合わなくなってしまう2年の夏ぐらいから準備を始める生徒が多いと担任の教師も言っていたスタートが遅い分は覚悟を決めて勉強するようにと最初のページに書かれた単語をひとまず頭に入れる左側に英単語その横に単語の意味右側には実際に単語を使った例文があってわかりやすい There, that's a little bit from page 100 So I actually did a lot better than I initially expected. Now, there were a lot of mystery kanji, but because I have Yomi-chan installed, I'm able to look up the pronunciation and definitions on the fly. I'm also able to create Anki cards for them with a single click. So by the time you're watching this video, I probably know all those words now. Next, let's get on to writing. Writing can be divided into two categories. One is actual handwriting, like writing the kana and the kanji, which, here you go. I have no problem doing this. Matter of fact, every time Anki pops up an audio card or a definition card, I write out the Japanese by hand. And second of all is actual sentence composition and communication. So I actually frequently use this site Hi Native to ask questions about things I'm not sure about to try to find some clarity. Whenever I use Hi Native, I also ask questions exclusively in Japanese. So to demonstrate my writing abilities, I'll write maybe like 3 sentences. I want to stress that I don't know how to output yet, and everything that I'm about to write is going to be unnatural. This is just to show where my writing level is at the moment. So let's write about my cats. 猫は2ついます。両方もオスです。名前はヘイヘイとフンフン。一つは黒くて、もう一つは三色です。とても可愛いです。So that's what I came up with on the fly, and it took me a while to write this, maybe it's something like 10 minutes, so definitely not fast. I didn't write this in English and then translate it to Japanese, I just thought of something to write in Japanese. The only thing I had to look up here was I didn't know how to write one is this and the other is that. Everything else came from my own vocabulary. Now, for some immediate feedback, I posted this onto Hi Native and got a few responses back. First of all, as every response points out, I used the counter tsu for animals, which is incorrect. It should have been hiki. So instead of tatsu, it should have been nihiki. Now, the thing is, I know about hiki, I've studied it before, but because I haven't seen or heard it being used enough, it didn't immediately register in my brain to use it. The second thing, as this user Yopitan suggests, is to use the word kau, meaning to keep a pet. I actually know this word and thought about using it, but I didn't know how to use it. I have heard it used in my immersion, but I haven't heard it enough for it to immediately register where I can fit this kau into my sentence. Fortunately, it seems like you can get away with not using it, like this user Naki and Obake, they didn't use it in their suggestions. The third thing is that I didn't know how to describe Funfun. See, I don't even know what type of cat he is in English, so explaining it in Japanese was kinda hard. The best word I came up with was to use sanshiki, meaning 3-colored, but that's not right. First of all, a 3-colored cat would be a mikeneko, which is a calico cat. And second of all, this is not a calico cat, but instead a toraneko. So this is a case of not enough vocabulary. Finally, my they are both males was ryohou mo osu desu. But as these two users have pointed out, it's supposed to be ryohou to mo osu desu. I don't know why this is, and looking it up doesn't give great results. So I'm just gonna ignore this one and let my brain figure it out. Now on to speaking. Speaking can once again be divided into 2 parts. One is the actual pronunciation of the words, and 2 is forming sentences and communicating. Obviously, I don't have that much practice speaking since I lived in Australia for most of the year where we were locked down 90% of the time. I do have a VR headset though, and even if I didn't, I could have gone into VR chat since you don't need VR to play VR chat. And I actually did go into VR chat and tried to speak to people, but by tried, I mean the best I got was saying Nihongo wakarimasen. I didn't have the balls to approach people because I didn't understand what they were saying and I didn't want to slow down their conversation just for them to include me. I think it's a good move that I didn't try to approach people though, because if I did, it would have been so awkward and would have just killed the mood for everybody. I do read my Anki cards out loud, so when it comes to reading something and saying it out loud, I think I can do that relatively well for my level. Now, I've been demonstrating that throughout the video so far, so I don't need to dedicate a segment to it, but I will dedicate a segment to me trying to speak Japanese completely unscripted. So, let's get on to VR chat. では始めましょう。今は、VR チャットにいる私の大好きなワールドを見てみましょう。このワールドはジャパンストリートという名前です。作者はニートです。さあ行きましょう。はい、これはジャパンストリートですね。このワールドは VR チャットにかけては規模は結構大きいですね。設定もいっぱいある。このワールドのこのワールドの特徴はすごい大きい。さらに時間は自動的に経つ。でもこの設定はマニュアルもできる。ほら どんな時間が欲しいなら、このスライダーに入力します。他の VR チャットのワールドに比べて、人があんまり多い。ま、人気があるですけど、他のワールドより、人気ですね。この子は悪教。この世界は悪教世界です。いろいろな悪教の悪教のモデルが あります。自分によって好きな悪教が使える。でもこのワールドはマジで大きいな。Okay, I hope I didn't give y'all too much secondhand cringe there because I sure gave myself firsthand cringe. I hate that I have to sit down and edit this. Knowing how many mistakes I've made just hearing it back, I know it's wrong and it doesn't make sense. And also, this was cut down to like 2 minutes and I've still included some etto and is. But the full thing is like 10 minutes.
Jesus Christ.
So even though I didn't plan out what I was going to say, I spent like 90% of the time thinking about what I was going to say and not actually saying it. And then when I actually did start talking, I would say what I thought of in my head smoothly and then get immediately lost afterwards. In my head, I'm not thinking in English and then translating it to Japanese. I'm just thinking in Japanese. I'm definitely not thinking in mentalese because I caught myself moving my mouth as I was thinking of what to say. And the things that I actually said were just what sounded natural to me at the moment. I did have to stop and think about the grammar of yori, and I think I still got it wrong. Rehearing it now, I think at least 2 sentences here I accidentally said with the opposite meaning of what I wanted to say. And the worst part is, the line that I had the most confidence in was, この子は悪教. Now I'm questioning that too because I got that from,
この子はナスの
but this cat's name is Nasuno. This dude's name is not Akyo. It is an Akyo. Would you say この子は猫? I have no clue. So anyway, I'm not gonna bother too much trying to get feedback on this. I don't really care anyway since it's way above my level and there are other things that I could better spend my time doing. Either way, there is probably not a single line, and I'm not even exaggerating here, not a single line was natural. Probably. I'm going to cringe so hard at this in the future. And finally, listening. Since most of the media I enjoy in Japanese are videos, listening is extremely important. To demonstrate this, I will be loading up a few videos from people I regularly watch on topics that I know a lot about. Then, I will also pull up a video from someone I've never watched before, but also on a topic that I know about. And then, finally, I'm going to pull up a video from someone I've never watched before on a topic that I'm familiar with in English, but not so much in Japanese. Okay, so for people who I regularly watch, I always watch Yume no Ririsus.
はい、こちらはですね、ギリギリ Q というコーナーになっておりまして、
Or this is the Giri Giri Q segment, rather.
OK と答えたものはすべて根掘り葉掘り私が聞いていこうと思います。
What the hell is nehori hahori? I know the gist of what she said, but I can't tell you exactly what she said. But it's basically what she said was, if it's okay, then tell me all about it.
香水は何を使ってるの？
What type of perfume do you actually use?
普段あんまりつけないんだけど、
I usually don't use it, but
たまにつけたいなっていう時は
sometimes when I want to use it,
アリアナグランデ
Ariana Grande?
雲の香水があって甘い匂いがするの。それ使ってます。
それ
I use that one. It's kind of sweet. That's the one I use.
甘いってそのなんかバニラ的な要素なのか、それともなんか花とかの匂いどっちなの？
When you say sweet, do you mean like it smells like flowers or like something else? I couldn't catch what the something else was.
バニラではないかな。
Oh, vanilla. I heard bunny. Vanilla. So does it smell like vanilla or does it smell like flowers?
花系かな。
結構フラワー系の感じなんだ。
Oh, it's less like vanilla, more like flowers. Nerisu goes, oh, it's more like flowers, huh? Okay, cool. Enough of that. Next one is someone who I've never watched before, but on a topic that I'm knowledgeable about. Maybe let's try this one.
しゃあ、今日はネタバレありの感想を聞きたいと思います。どうも
Oh, this is the spoilers version.
まず映画始まりました。
First of all, when the movie starts,
冒頭から笑ってよね。
you start laughing from the boto, but I'm not sure what the boto is. If I had to guess, it probably means the beginning, and the to would have this kanji in it. I'm not sure what the bo could be. Edit, I'm correct.
マイさんが包丁を持って出てくし
When Mai-san comes out with the kitchen knife.
翔子さんが作田並みに空気を読まない行動をしていたじゃないですか
Shoko is like Zakuta, and she's a bit KY.
マイさんとラブダマンを知ってんのにもかかわらず
Even though she knows that he's in a relationship with Mai-san,
一緒に生活するだとか
she decided to move in with them anyway.
なんかもうちょっかい出したりとかでも
Chokkai dastai toka. I'm not sure what that means.
作田が事故らないようにするための行動だったって分かった時さ
I didn't catch that.
いのりちゃんの演技もなんかね
What? With the help of Inori-chan? I'm not sure who Inori-chan is. There's no one called Inori-chan in the show. Must be his friend or something.
いのりちゃんすげえって思った
Inori-chan is amazing. Who the fuck is Inori?
でいのりちゃん今日大阪でライブやって
Oh, Inori as in Inori Minase, the voice actor of Shoko. Okay.
本当にずっと泣いて俺合計5回って言ったけど多分ね涙は出てないけど心はやられてたと思うんだよもう
I cried all 5 times that I watched it. Even if tears weren't flowing out, I was crying in my heart. Okay, enough of that. The final thing to look at is something that I'm familiar with in English, but not so much in Japanese. Okay, this is also pretty basic. Let's take a look at this. Okay, starting from Nobanagaga. I didn't hear what he said there. Yeah, I'm not catching anything he's saying. I heard mazu and jotai, so like, first of all, starting from this position, but there's also like a whole bunch of other noises that he made in between those two words I couldn't pick out. Put the soles of your feet on his hip. Catch your leg on your hand. This is rubber guard. With the other hand, first of all, on your stomach. Something about being on top of the stomach and the positioning of the fingers. Okay, so that's where I'm at in terms of my practical use of Japanese 1 year into my studies. So did I achieve my goals? Well, yes, actually, I did. My goal was to be able to watch anime and VTubers without English subtitles. That's it. And I am totally able to do that right now. As demonstrated earlier, my listening comprehension on topics that I'm familiar with is probably over 90%. Occasionally, I won't understand anything, but I think that's totally normal. The most important part is, yes, I am able to watch Japanese content without English subtitles and enjoy the content even if I'm not understanding 100% of it. The next part of this video will talk about how I got to where I am. I will briefly cover every method I tried and what worked and what didn't. However, I won't go into specific details like how I set up my Anki or top 5 apps to use or whatever. That will be for another video. So how did I get here? Maybe you've seen this video called I Learned Italian in 7 Days by Nathaniel Drew. I did too, and that's actually one of the reasons I decided to start learning Japanese, seeing as he was able to study a new language in just a week's time. Unfortunately, that video is a lie.
I've studied the language a little bit here and there over the last year and a half.
And there we have it. Whoa. I've studied here and there for 18 months? I rest my case.
But to avoid people calling me out for scamming, I want to give y'all a bit of my background in Asian languages and be very clear about my unfair advantages that monolingual English speakers don't have. I wish I had made more videos over the past year to document my evolution learning Japanese, you know, like the main reason I made this channel, but I was too focused on actually learning to spend time talking about how I was learning. I actually did try to make more videos, but I just wasn't happy with any of them. So excuse the length of this video, it's basically a year's worth of Japanese learning experience condensed into one video. So, my background in Japanese looks like this. Before 2013, I knew zero Japanese. I never even heard a Japanese speaker talk and I had no idea what Japanese sounded like. In 2013 though, I got into anime after seeing a clip on YouTube from the anime Zero no Tsukaima. From then on, I really enjoyed anime and became a weeb. I think it's pretty nuts now that I think about it, but maybe in the first month or so, I picked up the words arigato, konnichiwa, ohayo, oyasumi, baka, urusai, inu, maho, just from Zero no Tsukaima. I mean, these are super basic words, but remember, I didn't even know what Japanese sounded like until that point. Anime wasn't the only media I was consuming though. Around this time I also got into my first Vocaloid song was World Is Mine. I think in 2012, Miku held a concert in Hong Kong, so there were ads just all over the place, like on the sides of buses and whatnot. So because I got into anime, I was curious and I looked her up, and World Is Mine was the first result. Anyway, I basically got into anime and Vocaloid, and that completely took over most of my taste and preference in terms of entertainment. Of course, maybe during the first year or so of getting into anime, I jokingly wanted to learn Japanese just to watch anime without subs. But then, at the time, it seemed like not a big enough reasons to put so much effort into learning a new language. Also, two more giant reasons that made me not want to learn the language was, one, I had friends who were into K-pop and K-drama. When those guys started to learn Korean, people actually made fun of them, including my parents. So I just kind of tagged along and was like, isn't it silly to learn a language so you can actually enjoy things that you like? In hindsight, I really admire those people for taking the step that I was too afraid of taking. And number two, I really hated learning Chinese.
你是一头猪。
And that's my unfair advantage, by the way. Mandarin is my third language. See, English and Cantonese are my native languages, so I never had to learn them. Like, when I went to English class, it wasn't to learn English, it was to practice passing the test. I also never did a single class in Cantonese either. Mandarin was different though. This was clearly a third language, so it's the only language I've ever had to put conscious thought into learning. And my teacher throughout high school really sucked. So basically, hating learning Chinese made me think I was bad at learning languages, and it also made me dislike the process. I really didn't want to learn any other language because I thought I would suck at it and it would take forever to get good. So what made me change my mind? Whenever Kizuna I debuted is also when I started going down the VTuber rabbit hole.
He needs some milk!
So I actually started watching VTubers more than anime, especially when Hololive got popular. However, I was only watching them with English subs. Also, I was still missing that final push. The final thing that would make me go from one day I'll learn Japanese to today I will learn Japanese. And I think that final push came in the form of two different videos.
So this week, I'm going to see if I can become fluent in Italian.
I learned Italian in 7 days by Nathaniel Drew, and
Good morning, motherfuckers!
just Coco's existence in general. Being convinced that Nathaniel Drew actually learned something in 7 days and hearing how fluent Coco was made me realize that, hey, I live alone now, so nobody can stop me from learning Japanese other than myself, and I don't have to deal with shitty teachers anymore if I teach myself. So that was it. That was my background before I started learning Japanese. When I first started learning Japanese, I thought the best thing to do would be to look for a textbook, seeing as that's how I learned Mandarin in school. Now, this is not the first thing I did, it's just the first thing I thought of doing. I did eventually get Genki, but I'll make it real quick for you. Remember when I said that I hate reading? Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what I was thinking. I opened the book, closed it, and then never touched it again. That's all my experience with textbooks. I saw Mary-san, that's it. That's all I remember, Mary-san. The first effective thing I did was learn hiragana, thinking to myself that if I learned hiragana, I would be able to read basic Japanese. It didn't take me long to learn hiragana and katakana. Matter of fact, it took me 2 days. My first video on this channel also shows the method I used to learn hiragana and katakana so quickly, so I'll link it on the top right. But no, learning hiragana and katakana does not allow you to read basic sentences. But what it did make me realize is that if I want to understand this, I did not have enough vocabulary and I had to learn the grammar. Just because I can read the alphabet, it still doesn't mean anything. It's all just sounds. And in order for me to expand my vocabulary, I was going to have to study kanji. Okay, so, about kanji. Well, I already know the basics. I'm fluent in Mandarin when it comes to speaking, but specifically when it comes to speaking. Now, granted, regardless of how bad I was at Chinese, I still learned Chinese characters basically for more than 10 years. So it shouldn't be a surprise that I can pick up kanji a lot faster than someone who's never learned Chinese. This is especially important because it means that I will never have problems writing things by hand. I'm already used to it. Everything, including hiragana and katakana. I'm already used to how the strokes are supposed to flow and how big they are. Handwriting kanji and kana allows me to develop muscle memory for them, which makes them easier to remember in my opinion. Also, I don't have to learn radicals from scratch and come up with complex mnemonics for words. My Chinese-speaking friends and I all find a similar thing. If we get presented with a mystery kanji that we want to remember, we don't have to think about the meaning of the word and how the kanji builds up to it. We can just know it. An example is one of the first words that you ever see in Japanese. Watashi, or I. I don't know this word in Chinese. I've never seen it before. I still don't know what this word is in Chinese. I don't know how it's pronounced or what it means. But when I learned this word in Japanese, I didn't have to come up with a mnemonic for how this thing and this thing makes watashi. I just know it. It's similar to if someone asked you to write the letter A. You don't need a mnemonic for that, you just write it. Remember though that just because I don't have to come up with a mnemonic doesn't mean I don't. Sometimes I do. Remember, my Chinese writing level sucks. For those curious, it's about primary 3 level. So that's the advantage when it comes to learning how to write. But I also have a bigger advantage when it comes to learning new vocabulary. This word is pronounced chuyi in Japanese and chuyi in Cantonese, junbi in Japanese and zunbei in Cantonese, kantan in Japanese and gantan in Cantonese. So you see the point. Not everything is this handy though. This word is kozo in Japanese. I don't know this word in Cantonese or Mandarin. Shitsumon in Japanese, I don't know this word in Cantonese or Mandarin either. Aisatsu in Japanese does not make sense in Cantonese or Mandarin. Kankyo in Japanese is wangeng in Cantonese, so it doesn't match. And by the way, I could not read or write any of these words before I started learning Japanese. Learning them was not easy either. I mean, I think I definitely have an easier time than someone who's never studied Chinese before, because if you said kantan to me, like at least I know what it means right off the bat, but I would still have to learn the kanji just like everybody else. Also, all these words that I just said are Chinese loanwords. All the Japanese words with the kunyomi reading are brand new to me. So for kunyomi words, there's kind of the opposite effect sometimes. For example, kaku, meaning write. This word uses the kanji for book in Chinese, which is shu. Write in Chinese would be se, but se in Japanese, I don't know what this means because I've only seen it used in shashin as in photograph. Meaning I had to reprogram my mind to see this kanji as write instead of book. But to be honest, that's not that hard because I didn't even know that many kanji to begin with. And in addition to that, I didn't mention this earlier, but I actually have been immersing in the language for a long time. Maybe since 2014? The reason being is that I have all these audio dramas that I listen to whenever I go to sleep every night, and they're all in Japanese. I looked up the subtitles for the first few times, but because I listen to them every night, even still to this day, the contents have already drilled themselves into my head. So it 100% counts as immersion even if I didn't know I was immersing back then. So with all this together, can you still say that I've only studied Japanese for a year? I think so. I'm anticipating some comments here saying that this is clickbait because I already know some Chinese, but let me offer you another perspective. I think it's quite narrow-minded to say that because I'm choosing to make this video in English instead of in Chinese. Imagine if I had made this exact same video in Chinese and uploaded it to Bilibili, the Chinese version of YouTube, where most people are fluent Chinese speakers. They wouldn't be saying that I have an unfair advantage because they also know Chinese as their native language and they probably know more Chinese than me. Just because your first language is not Chinese, it doesn't give you the right to say that Chinese speakers can never learn Japanese from scratch. That's like me saying that English learners can't learn Italian from scratch because the alphabet is the same. Or saying that because your favorite movie is in a foreign language and you've watched it for more than 50 times, you can't study from scratch. I don't think that's true at all. I just think that it's important for me to clarify where my advantages are so people who don't have my advantages don't make bad comparisons with me and feel demotivated. When I started learning kanji and expanding my vocabulary, I used this thing called memorize. It's a lot like Duolingo, I think. I don't use Duolingo, so I'm not sure. But it uses an approach that gamifies language learning. It's got a streak system, a scoreboard system, and the course itself had various exercises from constructing sentences with blocks to listening exercises with native speaker audio. I'm kind of just listening out what I remember because I stopped using it after I cleared the first course in a week. In Nathaniel Drew's I Learned Italian in 7 Days video, he mentions how instead of learning every word, he picked out the top 1,000 most used words. So when Memorize was giving me some questionable words, or rather words that I thought were questionable, such as nigiaka, hint, it's a pretty popular word actually, I was like, okay, I can't add words that I actually want to know into Memorize. What's something I can add words to? Okay, who's this guy? Some random white dude on my feed going to VR chat speaking quote-unquote perfect Japanese? Nah.
どうもこんにちは、マットです。僕はですね、独学で日本語を覚えたアメリカ人なんですけど。
So, okay, he's onto something. Isn't he that guy that showed up on Dogen's channel too?
いやまさか選ぶがその規則の例外だってこと知らないの逆に。
Okay, so if you show up on Dogen's channel, you are 100% reputable. Anyway, so I check out Matt vs. Japan's channel, and I find this video, which is extremely boring. But either way, it introduced me to Anki and how to set it up properly, basically by only pressing again and good, not easy or hard. I started using Anki on August 30th. For those who don't know, Anki is an SRS system, which means that you can reallocate the stress of remembering new words and let Anki handle it for you. According to Anki, properly using it allows you to retain 90% of the cards seen. Furthermore, you can add whatever cards you want, including the Core 2K deck, which is composed of the 2,000 most important words and example sentences, all with pictures and audio from native speakers.
このソフトで日本語を勉強することができます。
I tried to keep using Memorize with Anki, but it became extremely obvious that Memorize was more of a waste of time than anything else. At first, I was consistently doing Anki every day, but then I missed a day, and that's a problem. You see, the problem is that you have to use Anki every day for it to be effective. If you don't, not only will it not be effective, but it'll be extremely difficult to pick it back up again, as the words you didn't review yesterday will stack up and become cards that you have to review today. If you miss 7 days, you'd have to do 7 days worth of cards, which you've probably forgotten, in one go, which is extremely time consuming and ineffective. I knew I had to develop a habit of doing Anki every single day. Otherwise, I'd allow myself to slip and never be able to recover. So even though I did miss for a week straight, I managed to push myself to finish 7 days worth of cards in one sitting. Building this habit was not easy for me. But 2 months in, I became consistent in Anki. So, during all this time, I was basically doing Anki and nothing else. Not much immersion. I was still watching Japanese content, but with English subs. Or just English content, period. I was still doing nothing in pure Japanese. And I was doing this for a very important reason that I don't see that many people talking about. Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis on second language acquisition states that the only way in which we acquire languages is through comprehensible input.
In my opinion, we acquire language in one way and only one way, when we understand messages.
If most of what I was using my Japanese for was videos where cute anime girls sit in front of cameras and talk, and my vocabulary was less than 100 words, there is no way anything coming in would be comprehensible. It's not like Stephen Krashen's demonstration on learning German through immersion where he has this whole diagram set up.
Das ist Mr. Spock, ja? Mr. Spock hat 2 Ohren. Ohren. Verstehen Sie? Ohren? Hat 2 Ohren. If you understood lesson number 2, I did everything necessary to teach you German.
These girls just sit here. There is no diagram. If they're playing a game or something, it's better since you can see what's on screen. They're not trying to teach you something, they're just talking naturally, and that's just way too fast for a beginner to comprehend.
Here's lesson number 1. Wir werden jetzt anfangen, Deutsch zu lernen. Und ich hoffe, dass Sie alle sehr viel Erfolg mit Deutsch haben werden. Do you think if I kept talking to you like that, you'd pick up German? How about if I repeated it? Would that help? Probably not. How about if I said it and you repeated it back? How about if I wrote it out for you and you copied it down? How about if I wrote it out for you and deleted every 5th word and you tried to guess what the word is? The truth is that none of these things help. None of these things mean anything, and I hope you can see that now.
If the input is not comprehensible, you are not acquiring the language. It's like trying to teach a baby about color, but the baby is blind. Meaning that diving into deep waters without learning to swim is not likely to teach you how to swim, but more likely to cause you to drown and die. I'm not the only person who feels this way.
In my theory, the value of time spent being immersed is linked to your current level. The better you get, the more valuable it becomes. For example, if you're still a beginner, the amount you'll actually learn from 10 hours of binge-watching Japanese shows is low compared to what you can achieve with 10 hours of dedicated study.
But unfortunately for me, on September 28th of 2020, YouTube killed off community subtitles, meaning viewers could no longer add subtitles to videos for others to use. Only the video creator themselves could. And one of the channels that I frequently watch, Kimagure Cook, or Kaneko, would no longer have English subtitles. I think every now and then I'd boot up a video and then not understand it, then get frustrated and leave. But eventually I did start understanding more and more as I blasted through my Anki deck. I grew my vocabulary using Anki, and that grew my confidence to start watching pure Japanese videos. I didn't understand 90% of Kaneko's videos, but I'd still hear some words here and there that I had learned in the deck. And more importantly, I started picking out words specific to his videos. Sanmai Oroshi, meaning to cut a fish into 3 parts.
そしたら3枚におろしていきます。
Shio meaning salt.
たっぷりの塩を加えて、
Shoyu meaning soy sauce.
お好きなお醤油をダダダダと入れます。
Numeri meaning sliminess.
ぬめりを落としていきます。
And in Matt vs Japan terms, Kaneko became my language parent. I also started joining into VTuber streams too. So Coco was my favorite when I first started, then it became Pekora, Otogibara Era, and now it's Yume no Ririsu, Ito Life, Guno Mire, and Tamaki, especially when they're all together. Importantly, when I first started, I didn't jump right in. A majority of the content I was watching was still in English, so probably 10% of the entertainment I was taking in was Japanese. I still spent more time in Anki than I was immersing. Here's the first milestone, the N5 test. I kept on doing Anki every single day, and one day I just wanted to test myself. What better way to do this than to put myself through an actual JLPT test and see where I'm at or what I have to improve on? By the way, I don't necessarily think that this is a good idea. So on March 30th, 2021, about 6 months into my studies, I managed to clear the N5 test. Y'all can argue like, oh, this is just a mock test, it's different to sitting in a real exam hall and having the pressure and whatnot. Listen, I'm not gonna argue with you. You can treat this as legit or not, I don't really care since I'm not doing this for the JLPT anyway. I just did it because I was bored and wanted to see a gauge of where I was. The next milestone I hit was the N4 test. And by the way, I'm only using these tests as a milestone and nothing more. It just makes it easier for me to divide this video into parts. It's not like after every test I like Poke-Evolve or something. 1 month after the N5 test, on April 21st, I cleared the N4 test. During this month, I did nothing different. I don't have the exact dates for when this happened, but if I had to guess, I probably cleared the first 2 sets of the Core 2K deck and was probably somewhere in the middle of the 3rd during that time. The 3rd deck of the Core 2K deck was when I started going, okay, these words are unrelated to things that I'm interested in. I had this thought particularly when it started showing me the words keizai, kabu, seiken. These are all politics words that I did not think were a priority to learn for me. So I started to add new cards by myself for words that I was actually interested in. If you'd like to learn about the 3 best ways to create Anki cards directly from anime, manga, or light novels in just a few clicks, check out this video on the top right after this video ends. Around this time, I also stepped up the amount of immersion I was doing. Maybe 30% of the media I was consuming on a daily basis was 100% Japanese. If I could go back in time, I would tell myself to step up my immersion to 50% to 100% right about now. The only reason I kept at 30% was because I didn't know where to look for 100% Japanese content, but now I do. I did also watch my first anime in 100% Japanese during this time as well. It was SAO, but with the gun one, the pink thing. Yeah, it wasn't that good, IMO. But it was one that I had my eyes on that I hadn't watched before, and I found it on the site called Anime with Japanese subtitles as well, so that's pretty good. I don't like the site Anime because it's only got a tiny selection of anime and some of them don't work. I do have a much better way to watch anime with Japanese subs now, but I'll save that for another video. We'll link up here when finished. Anyway, with the increased Japanese content I was intaking, I realized there's a lot of mystery kanji that I can't read or understand. So I had 2 problems that I wanted to solve. Number 1 was to learn more kanji to defeat mystery kanji, so basically learn all the Joyo kanji. And 2, learn more relevant vocabulary so I can get better input. So seeing as these were the 2 things I wanted to solve and I didn't know where to find more input, I decided to make a drastic change. If you look at my Anki right here, I did 2 things to solve the aforementioned problems. So first of all, I thought it'd be more efficient to download a pre-made deck of common words used in anime instead of creating cards myself, so I downloaded this really bad deck called the VNLN Anime Manga V2K deck. I do not recommend this deck. It only has words and no example sentences, and the audio is crap. I had to customize it so much and do so much work with it to get it to work efficiently, so I think it's just not worth it. Either way, I got the deck and I started using it. I also saw this video from Matt vs Japan on how RTK was the fastest way of learning kanji. So instead of repeating my mistakes and getting a book, which, remember, I can't read for shit, I instead got an Anki deck for RTK. Now, Matt vs Japan recommends doing 20 cards a day, but I'm fast as fuck, boy! So I've always been doing 30 since the very beginning. I remember that Anki was supposed to give you 90% recollection of your cards, and since I was getting around the 98 to 99% range, clearly I still had more mental capacity to remember more things.
This is big brain time.
So when I added RTK into Anki as a separate deck, I started doing 60 cards on RTK and 60 cards on my regular deck.
Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity? insanity is
doing 60 cards on RTK and 60 cards on my regular deck. On the first 4 days of doing this, I did 158 new cards per day in addition to doing already learned cards and matured cards. Remember, I handwrite everything as well, so the entire process took about 3.5 hours per day. I did not know that this was insane until I interacted with some people from the Refold community recently. But yeah, apparently it's insane. Now, you might think that that's absolutely absurd, and how would I possibly have any time left to immerse? But I was actually still clocking in at least 1 to 2 hours of immersion in pure Japanese every single day, because I watch Japanese content when I'm eating dinner, and it takes me 1 to 2 hours to eat dinner, because I'm slow. I was watching significantly less English content since getting Japanese content was easy when I'm signed into this channel, as opposed to my Team WNJ channel, which is still primarily in English. After doing this intense Anki schedule for a few months, I have to say that my vocabulary and kanji knowledge boosted up insanely, and I mean really insanely. I did a kanji recognition game and scored a 92% on Kente 3 kanji, or in other words, secondary school grade 8, or 58.6% of N1 kanji. I toned down my Anki after I was satisfied with the giant shot up in my comprehension, and unintentionally, or rather naturally, it caused my immersion time to go way up. I think maybe 2 months before making this video, I was sitting about 70% immersion, where 70% of the things I was doing every single day was in Japanese. And 1 month ago, I left Australia to fly back home to Hong Kong. From the day I took off, I've been living in about 95% Japanese. The 2 weeks that I spent quarantining in the hotel were so powerful because I really survived through, 99% Japanese? Other than that one time I did a stream on my main channel and a few hours of gaming with my English-speaking friends, everything was in Japanese. I also want to take some time to address a point on output. When I was writing the script for this video, I initially planned on mentioning output as the next step. However, as I was making this video, it became increasingly clear to me that I was not ready for that. Although I understand most of what I watch, I think there are still some small but important details that slip through the cracks of my understanding. My initial point on output was that if I started outputting now, it probably wouldn't take that long to get good at outputting. As many learners of the speak early approach have noted, you can go from nothing to conversational in a year if you just practice speaking without going out of your way to get more input.
I've always suggested that people should start speaking immediately from day one. So I didn't have time to spend 1 or 2 years immersing in the language, so I wanted to be able to speak immediately.
Call this one the speak early school of thought. The thing about this school of thought is that it is very effective. There's a very quick progression from nothing to a decent level in a year, but after that, it's very hard to show.
If you work hard enough, both you and I are going to achieve our goals and reach a high level of that language, but I argue that I could do it faster than you. What damages people is when they make the same mistakes for 5, 10 years, so ingrained in their brain. But that is not necessarily from the first 6 months of language learning, but from many years of not learning from their own mistakes. I don't have any bad habits that I picked up.
Okay, hold on, give me 30 seconds to go on a quick tangent. No hate to Oriental Pearl, but I think it's important to point this out. 如果你想跟 Matt 比较的话，你不可以说自己是在一个 high level。这是从一个可以说中文的人来说 ，Oriental Pearl 的中文并不自然。虽然我可以听得明白他在说什么，但是一听到他的发音，就会知道他不是一个中国人。Matt 的日本跟 Matt 的日本话不可以比较。虽然我的日本话还没到一个高水平，我一听到 Matt 说日本话的时候，跟一个真的日本人在说日文的时候，听起来差不多一模一样。从我的角度来说 ，Matt 和 Oriental Pearl 根本是完全不同的水平。And finally, to finish up my point, again, I'm not trying to hate on Oriental Pearl. I'm sure she's a wonderful person. However, when it comes to learning languages in the most efficient way, the best way to know whether a method works or not is to look at the results that it produces. When you search up Oriental Pearl and scroll down a little bit, you'll find a video by Learn Chinese with Rita, where a native Chinese speaker who speaks better Chinese than me breaks down exactly what goes wrong with Oriental Pearl's Mandarin. It is very bold, yet ultimately wrong of her to say that she has no bad habits. If anything, that just proves the input hypothesis correct. When you search up Matt vs. Japan and scroll down the YouTube feed, you will not find a video by a native Japanese speaker saying that Matt vs. Japan does not sound native. That's not because it doesn't exist, it's just that the videos that do exist admit that they can only find nitpicks and that Matt does sound native. It's extremely ironic that she says, what damages people was making the same mistake for years and years. Yet, there's no way for you to learn from your own mistakes if you don't get enough input. Yes, you can get a teacher to tell you that you're wrong. Even she talks about how great her teacher was, especially in the beginning. And you would think that having someone tell you that you're wrong immediately would be much faster than spending years and years getting input. Yet Oriental Pearl has been studying Chinese for 8 years.
I've been studying Japanese for 10 years total, but I basically reached the level that I reach now in a 5-year period.
Oh my gosh!
And this proves that if you don't get enough input, even if you have a great teacher, you will do exactly what she says to avoid. That is, going years and years without correcting yourself simply because you don't have enough input to correct yourself. If you choose to ignore everything I just said and output early anyway, what exactly are the bad habits that you will develop? Well, I have a few actual examples. Let's take a look. Saying, open the lights instead of turn on the lights. See, I'm a native English speaker, and I remember saying this when I was like 5 years old, but then I corrected myself in like 3 days. My girlfriend, who is not a native English speaker, or rather, the English input that she gets most of the time is not native English, she ends up saying, open the lights. It took her several months, maybe even years, to correct the mistake. Although I understood what she was trying to say, as a native English speaker, I did correct her. Not on the first time she said it, because on the first time I gave her reasonable doubt, but it was on maybe, I don't know, the 3rd or 4th time I did point it out to her. In other words, I believe that the name bad habits does not do this term justice. I think they should be called conversation disruptors, as they are bad enough that they disrupt the flow of a conversation, take years to fix, and could completely be avoided by having more correct native input. Some people might say, hey, you can't avoid conversational disruptors 100%. Just look at how many native English speakers say could of instead of could have. And to that, I say that they don't have enough correct native input. FYI, my English teacher in Canada used could of as a synonym for could have. So I imagine a lot of her students are still using could of to this day, simply because they never got correct input in the first place. I think it's also important to talk about what's next. In my opinion, the most efficient thing to do to take my Japanese to the next level is to hone my listening skills even more. Instead of trying to get my reading ability on par with my listening, I would rather double down on my strengths and really get my listening to a near native level. Think about it like this. If getting comprehensible input is what will help me acquire Japanese, would I rather go at a blistering pace with the stuff that I'm already strong in so I can listen to more stuff in real time? Or would I rather reduce myself to a crawl and brute force through every single page of this book with veins popping out the side of my head? I get more input through listening than I do reading. Therefore, I should focus on listening. Yes, I am working on my reading too, and I hope to finish my first Japanese light novel by next year. But the reason for doing this is because my reading is dead blunt at the moment. I want my listening to be razor sharp, but I'm happy with my reading just being regularly sharp. There are many topics in this video that I have a lot more to say about, like exactly how I set up my Anki and how I got it to look like this, the top apps and plugins to greatly improve comprehension, etc. If you'd like to see those videos, subscribe now and hit the bell icon to get notifications when they're up. While you're down there, why not also drop a like if you liked this video and found it helpful? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or join our Discord server linked in the description so you can drop by and say hi. Thank you all for watching this extremely long video, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers!